Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Senator Richard Durbin and Mike Breen.
Hello, everybody.
Thanks, Senator Durbin. It's a little humbling to be on this stage, just the two of us, but thank you.
I'm humbled to be with you.
Thank you for coming to talk with us today. We've got some pretty serious material to cover, so I'll get right to it.
Okay.
I had the honor of serving as an Army paratrooper in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Seriously.
Thank you. And a lot of the men and women that served under me and served with me and their families have benefited tremendously from policies that you and your fellow Democrats in Congress helped enact. I'm thinking of the 21st Century GI Bill.
Sure.
I'm thinking of VA funding. I'm thinking of the Caregiver Act, that you yourself, the caregiver program that you yourself sponsored. And some of your fellow leaders, thinking of Senator Nelson, Senator McCaskill, Sherrod Brown, are facing some pretty tough races this cycle. So I have to ask, with Mitt Romney talking about privatizing the VA and with these tough races coming up, what does it mean for veterans? What does it mean for their families? What is this election about for them? And what do we have to be concerned about if the Senate changes hands?
Well, I shudder to think about this, but you have to think about the possibility. And what we hear from the Republicans in terms of cutbacks in spending, what we hear from Mitt Romney about his plans for the VA is troubling. Troubling because for Mike and for every other woman and man who volunteered to serve our nation, we made a promise to them. We said, you take an oath to serve in the military and risk your life. We take an oath to stand by you when you come home, to make sure that you can get a good education. If you need medical care, to make certain that you're taken care of. Maybe to help you find that first job, buy a home, start a business. It's a solemn promise as far as I'm concerned. So when people like Mitt Romney suggest, well, we're going to change this all the way around, he is ignoring a reality. And the reality is the Veterans Administration for decades has been there for the veterans. For decades, it has provided affordable care. And the veterans truly, truly appreciate it, and they understand how important it is in their lives. I know all over my state, I visit veterans hospitals all the time, from one end of the state to the other. And these vets, some of them in their 80s from World War II, some of them, who are brand new, they come in there and they know they're going to be treated with respect, with professional care. So when you start cutting money in these areas, the first question you have to ask is, what are we going to lose? Now, Mike mentioned the Caregivers Act. Let me tell you about that one. The original idea behind this came from Hillary Clinton when she was a senator from New York. And here's what it boils down to. There are thousands of disabled veterans who are able to stay home instead of going into a hospital or some kind of care facility because a person in their family is standing by them. And I've met these people. It could be a spouse, a parent, a brother, a sister. They have decided that they're going to give them the love and attention they need so they can stay right where they want to be, in a home. It's not easy sometimes. Some of these vets have serious medical challenges. Caregivers Act says, tell you what, if you're willing to dedicate your life to this disabled vet, we're going to help to train you if you need nursing skills or medical training so that you can take care of this vet. Number two, if you need some time off, it's a full-time job, If you need respite time off, we'll bring in a visiting nurse or something to take care of the vet while you take some time to yourself. And number three, if you can't make it financially, and some of them can't, even with the disabled vets payment, we'll pay up to $3,000 a month for you to stay with that veteran. That's not a huge sum of money. And if you just look in dollar terms, it's a heck of a lot cheaper than institutional care. But it's where the vet wants to be, where the family wants that vet to be, and it's a program that works. Now, when I hear the Republicans talking about cutting programs like that, I think to myself, what's the alternative? You either turn your back on the vet, or you put them in another setting, not nearly as, I wouldn't say as loving, but maybe that's the right word, not nearly as loving at a much greater cost. So the bottom line is, when it comes to the vets, we have a promise we have to keep. And secondly, those who don't understand that better be reminded in November.
Thank you. And two of my good friends, both double amputees, have benefited directly from that program, so I'm personally quite grateful to it.
Last Saturday, I was with a woman named Tammy Duckworth. I hope some of you have heard that name.
She's fantastic.
Isn't she great? I called Tammy when she was at Walter Reed going through surgery and asked her to run for Congress, and I was stunned when she said yes. And this time she's going to win, and she's running a great campaign. So I'm glad some of you know who she is.
Not much she's afraid to do, I don't think.
No, she could take the world on.
So we've heard some pretty disturbing reports recently. Over the last year, there have been some tough stories about for-profit colleges and some predatory practices preying on students and veterans in particular. And I got to say, as the first guy in my family to have the opportunity to go to college, I mean, education has literally transformed my life. I know it's done that for many of the people in this room, and it's continuing to do that for us. I mean, what can we do to make sure that everyone in America has the opportunity to earn a college degree without having to face predatory practices by for-profit colleges?
Well, Mike, that's the right question. I got into this when I started taking a close look at for-profit schools. You know what I'm talking about here? When I say for-profit schools, many people do, but some don't. And it's easy to get confused. You go Google the word college or university and watch what happens on your computer screen. You will be bombarded by ads primarily from for-profit schools that want to sign you up. So what are the biggest for-profit schools? The biggest one, University of Phoenix. It's called the Apollo Group that owns it. Second one, DeVry out of Chicago. And the third one is the one that owns the Washington Post, Kaplan. Used to be the other way around. The Washington Post owned them, but then Kaplan made more money than the Washington Post. So, and what they are offering is a new way to go to school. And sometimes it's online, sometimes it's more. And it turns out that some of them are good and many of them are awful. All of them are expensive. Most of them will drag you more deeply in debt than any other school you can attend. And I'm sick of it. I'm sick and tired of young people being duped into signing up at for-profit schools, being led into loans that they won't be able to pay off in a natural lifetime for worthless diplomas. And I've seen it happen over and over and over. Westwood College, based out of Colorado, all over the United States, currently under investigation in Illinois. Our Attorney General says she can't handle all the complaints about this school that offers a worthless diploma in law enforcement. Too many people are watching CSI and signing up at Westwood and ended up with nothing except a big debt. And I met one of them. She's 24 years old. Took her 5 years to get her law enforcement degree from Westwood, $85,000 in student loans, and she took the diploma to the local police departments in the Chicagoland area, and they all laughed at her. Said, that's not a real school. How would she know? Well, she's in debt, a debt she can't discharge in bankruptcy. Now let's take it to the GI Bill. On the GI Bill, GIs can, of course, attend colleges, universities. Most of it's paid for. That's great. That's the way it should be. But many of them end up signing up for these worthless schools, using up all their GI Bill benefits. These for-profit schools charge twice as much as a public college or university, dramatically even more than private colleges and universities. And most of their money comes from the federal government. I'm working with Tom Harkin, Kay Hagan, a number of senators. Here's what we want to make sure. First, let's accredit these schools. Let's find out if there really are colleges and universities, just call themselves that. Secondly, let's make sure that the students attending those schools know what the likelihood is of finding a job. Do you think that young woman would have signed up for 5 years at Westwood if she knew that every police department in the area laughed at her when she presented her diploma? That's what happened to her. Number three, they want to lure you into private student loans, move you away from government loans. Private loans, more expensive, almost twice as much as an interest rate, little or no flexibility in the terms, and if you start missing payments, the debt just piles up. So we've got to make sure people know when they're eligible for college student loans from the government, they use all of that up before they take the first dollar in a private loan. There's a lot to be done here. And I have to tell you, sadly, no support from the other side of the aisle. They won't even attend Tom Harkin's hearings on the issue. And it's an important issue.
Well, thanks for that. Another important issue. You were one of the sponsors, the sponsor in many ways of the DREAM Act. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you stood against Arizona's immigration bill. You said it was inconsistent with American values. Here's 700 people that agree with you.
Good.
Some of the proudest moments of my own life have been as a legal advocate for Iraqi refugees. These are people who stood with us, shoulder to shoulder, at war, and who are now seeking safe harbor and a new beginning for their families in America. I mean, what have immigrants given to this country, and what do we have left to give?
Well, I can't answer that question because I have a conflict of interest. You see, my mother was an immigrant to this country. She was brought here at the age of 2 from Lithuania. The boat landed 101 years ago in Baltimore, not Ellis Island, but Baltimore, and my grandmother, hello Baltimore, oh say can you see, and the boat landed with my mom and her brother and sister and my grandmother, whom I never met. How in the world that woman got from Baltimore, Maryland to East St. Louis, Illinois, I have no idea. They didn't speak any English, but I am proud of that. You come to my office, you're welcome. If you come to my office, right behind my desk, you'll see my mother's naturalization certificate. It's right there for every visitor to see, particularly if they want to talk about immigration. Because I happen to believe 2 things. First, I believe that the diversity of this country is its strength. The fact that we come from so many different parts of the world, we bring different ethnic, religious, cultural experiences together, makes us a special place. And secondly, we have something in our genetic code that you can't ignore. Somewhere in your family was somebody who had the guts to get up and come to America. Most of them had no money, didn't speak the language, didn't know what was going to happen next, but they had the courage to do it. That's in your DNA, my friends, and that's what makes America a lot different than most other countries. I think it's part of our entrepreneurial spirit. It's part of our American spirit. So the DREAM Act I introduced 11 years ago when a young woman called my office, her mother actually, and talked about a problem she had. She'd been brought to America from Korea at the age of 2, no papers filed. She was now 18, and she was an accomplished concert pianist. She'd been accepted at the Juilliard School of Music and the Manhattan Conservatory of Music, and when she went to fill out the application and it came to citizenship, she said to her mom, "What am I supposed to put there?" Her mom said, "I don't know." Her mom said, "Maybe we better call Durbin." So they called our office, and we checked it out, and the law was clear. Teresa Lee, who had lived here for 16 years, knew no other country, had to leave America for 10 years under our law and apply to come back. 10 years. I thought, what in the heck did she do wrong? I mean, you don't exactly have a vote in your family when you're 2 years old and they say we're headed for America. So I put in the DREAM Act and said if you came here as a child or infant, if you've lived here for at least 5 years, if you graduate high school, if you have no serious criminal issue problems at all, good moral standing, and either complete 2 years of college or serve in the military, you're going to be on a path to citizenship. That's the DREAM Act. So when I introduced the bill, I got a phone call from a colleague of mine, Orrin Hatch of Utah. And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I just put in this bill." He said, "That's my bill." I said, "Really?" "Yeah." He said, "I came up with that idea." I said, "Well, let's do it together." At the time, the Republicans were in the majority. I said, "Orrin, you can be the lead sponsor. I'll join you in this thing." Well, I think you know how this story ends. At the end of the day, he's not even voting for it, let alone sponsoring it. And the Republican support for it has been steadily diminishing. There are a handful of Republicans who've shown extraordinary courage in voting for it. Let me mention 2 of them. Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. You'd be surprised to hear that, but it's true. And Richard Lugar of Indiana. Now, Dick Lugar, he stepped up 2 years ago, and wrote a letter with me to President Obama, a person who happened to be my colleague in the Senate and a co-sponsor of the DREAM Act. And we said, would you agree not to deport any DREAM Act eligible kids? If they're eligible, until we can pass the bill, don't deport them. And so we tried for 2 years, and on June 15th, the president announced it. On August 15th, it goes into effect. And it means that these DREAM Act eligible kids can literally sign up for temporary, renewable, legal, protected status in America. It's a breakthrough. And it's a breakthrough in the area of human rights and civil rights. And I am damn proud that our president did it, speaking out for these young people and for the principle of fairness and humanitarianism in this nation.
So, Senator, I wish we had another hour. There's a lot else to cover, but we're out of time. Thank you so much for your leadership and for coming to speak with us today.
Let me tell you something. I know you call yourselves progressives, and so am I, and damn proud of it. What we stand for is opportunity. Someone asked Warren Buffett once. They said, "Why are you a Democrat? You know, you're one of the richest men in the world." And he told a story, and I'm not sure it's original, but it's a good one. He told a story. He said, "Well, listen, I look at it this way." He said, "I won," he calls it, "the ovarian lottery. I'm a white male in America." It doesn't get a lot better than that. It should, incidentally, but it doesn't at this moment. And he said, "But what if? What if God came to you 5 minutes before you were born and said, you're 5 minutes away from arrival in this world. Oh, I'm not going to tell you whether you're going to be black, white, or brown, male or female. I'm not going to tell you whether you're going to be physically able or disabled. I'm not going to tell you if you're going to be smart or not so smart. I'm going to give you one thing to decide. In the world that you're going to be born into, would you rather that that world is led by a Democrat or a Republican?" He said, "From my point of view, the choice is clear. The Democrats, from the beginning, have said that we are going to create opportunities for everybody. The Republicans may have as their philosophy, just remember, we're all in this alone. But the Democrats and progressives happen to believe we're all in this together. And when we help people move forward, as people help me in our lives, it makes for a better country." Now you got me on a roll. I want to tell you a story. 2 weeks ago, we swore in the first Korean-American judge in Chicago. John Lee is his name. He was sworn in by the first Chinese-American judge in Chicago, Ed Chang. I nominated both of them. President Obama appointed both of them. And so John Lee gets up with his family there in a courtroom full, and he says, "What a great land this is. What a great land of opportunity. But it's also a great land of generosity." And he told a story. Born in Korea, mother and father moved to Germany. Dad was a coal miner, mom was a nurse. They weren't doing too well. They decided to move to Chicago. They got themselves a one-room apartment in Albany Park and barely scratched by. Came the first day of school, little Jun Lee, who didn't speak 2 words of English, was escorted to school by his mom. Across the street from school in Korean, she said to him, "Okay, now before you cross the street, we need a name for you." He said, "I have a name. It's Jun Lee." He said, "Nope, we need an American name for you. I've written down a list, pick one." "Michael?" "No, sorry." "Robert?" "No." "William?" "No." "John?" "John. It'll be John Lee. Go to school." He goes to school, this poor kid, like many, tossed into a classroom where he couldn't even speak the language. So he said he remembers art class. In art class, he's listening carefully, and the teacher says, "Tomorrow, I want you each to bring a can of beans to school from home." Can of beans, can of beans. Goes home to his mom, says, "I need to bring a can of beans to art class tomorrow." "Can of beans? Can of beans." "Okay, here's a can of beans." Puts it in his backpack. Goes to school. Art class time, the teacher says, "Bring out what you brought from home." He brings out a can of beans, puts it on his desk, and looks in the classroom. Everybody else has a box of cereal. He didn't understand what she said. He starts to tear up and starts to cry, and the teacher comes over and sees it and said, "Oh, John, I brought your box of cereal." Grabs a can of beans, hands him the box of cereal, spares him the embarrassment. He said, "It was a little generosity, but I remember it to this day." And then he said, "And I remember this courtroom, because it was in this courtroom at the age of 8 that I became a naturalized citizen of the United States of America. And it was in this courtroom 2 weeks ago, that day, that he became a federal district court judge for life. And it was in that courtroom the next week when he would preside over a naturalization ceremony." That, my friends, is his story, his family's story, and it's our story. This is the story of America. And when we embrace this as our heritage and our future, we'll be a stronger nation, and progressives get that. Thank you. Good to see you, man.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, everybody.